Good evening, everyone. We're here for a City Council meeting. It's Monday, March 4th, 2019, and we'll start this meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Solomon, Modrick, Nordstrom, Drew, Scott, Drury, Laurenti, Roberts, Armstrong, Lewis. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll have an invocation by Greg Kroger from First United Methodist, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Almighty and gracious God, under you the people rule. And on behalf of the people, this council is gathered to govern the affairs of our beloved community. We pray this evening that as they undertake each matter before them, that they might have wisdom from on high to consider each and every situation and to make decisions that are best for our people and for our city. We are grateful, Lord, that we can gather in freedom, and may we use this freedom to build better lives for one another. We also offer our gratitude, Lord, for sunshine, for warmer temperatures, and we ask, please send more. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. And now for the adoption of the agenda. We'll go to Heidi, or we'll, never mind. Is there any motion to change the agenda or adopt it as is from the council? Motion to adopt by Becky Drury and a second by Jason Solomon. All in favor of adoption of the agenda as written, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to general public comment. We don't have any speaker requests under general public comment. I think those of you that maybe are going to comment are going to comment on item 33, and we'll take those requests when we get farther down the agenda. So in the meantime, if you're here and you want to speak on an item, fill out a form here and bring it over to this side of the dais. Okay, non-public hearing items 1 through 45. We'll open the public comment on items 1 through 32. And those are the consent items. Would there be a motion about the consent calendar? Go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Could we pull item 10?
Item 10, and Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Please pull item number 18.
Okay, any other items to pull from the consent calendar? If not, we could have a motion to approve consent items with the exception of 10 and 18.
So moved.
Motion by Scott, second by Armstrong. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10, approve use agreement between the City of Rapid City and Rapid City BMX for operation of a youth biking program. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, may I make a motion to approve this use agreement between the city and the Rapid City BMX Incorporated for operation of the youth biking program and retain the floor?
Second.
Okay, second by Lisa Modrick, and you still have the floor.
Thank you. I'm looking for Jeff Bigler. Is he in the room?
He's
No.
not.
So
Anybody else?
I missed him. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points that I'm getting emails about the confusion on the use of the of this particular park, and it has to do with some complications about what the language is and interpretation of the language. And I see Mr. Bigler is back in the room, so Jeff, if you could approach the podium for me, please. And I just want to re-emphasize the Land and Water Conservation Fund is definitely set aside so that it is part of the grant funding that we get to use or have used for establishing these park systems. So the confusion that I'm seeing in the emails that I'm getting has to do with the use on that for the second, in other words, the public, secondary uses of the public. Can you, I've done my best to re-explain it, and it seems to be boiling down to a difference of opinion on how the language is interpreted. So do you care to add any other comments? I'm sure you've been included on some of the emails.
I have, and just a quick background on the Land Water Conservation Fund. This is a fund, a federal grant program that's administered from the State Department of Game, Fish, and Parks. Rapid City has received funding 35 different times since the first LWCF grant was received in 1965. One of the conditions of receiving these funds is that the facility for which the funds are received, the entire facility, is encumbered with certain restrictions. And one of those restrictions is that the facility must remain available for public outdoor recreation. We have been in contact with the State Game, Fish, and Parks, our representative there, who's very familiar with these restrictions. We've been working with him for the last couple of years to identify those areas that are out of compliance currently with LWCF guidelines. And so we have, part of the remedy for this was to redo the formerly lease agreements for these facilities that are taking place on fields that are encumbered with land water conservation funds, taking them from a lease agreement to a use agreement.
So I'm not running out of time. I just wanted to make sure that the explanation had to do with the public use of it. So the Parks Department has some control over the time frames of when the primary users can use these facilities and then when the public can use it. So the other issue had to do with if it had happened during a storm event or after a storm event. So the access would be limited as well in there.
You're right, you're right.
That is correct, yes. We would have the ability not to have it open to the public if it's going to cause damage to the facility.
And then one more, just a separate item is that if I'm reading all of the agreements, they are pretty similar except for two of them. It has to do with the Church Softball League and Timberline. There's just a little bit difference between those two because of those two having different timelines on it and their periods of use.
Right.
Otherwise, everything else is very comparable to what we see with the BMX facility. Thank you. I yield.
Okay, Darla Drew.
Thank you. A couple more questions, Jeff. So when you say close it, what is that exactly? Does it mean it really bars access to any of those places, or can kids or users still get on that track, and even in the rain, or if it's a muddy event or whatever?
These facilities, I think the one that most people are the most concerned with is the BMX facility. If the weather is such that public use would create damaging conditions to the facility, we would just not open that facility. We would keep the gates closed. That way there would not be any damage to the facility caused by use during severely inclement weather. And we have that ability to do that with some of our other areas as well.
And when you speak about the damage to the track, I guess, for those of us who aren't familiar with BMX, and I'm not, would it be such that it would make it unusable, or you'd have to go back and fix it, or what happens?
I'm not a BMX person either. All I can speak to is I've seen them out there working diligently on preparing their track for their practices and their events. And there's a lot of time and effort that goes into maintaining that track so it's in a safe and usable condition. I don't know at what point damage would occur if there's a lot of rain, but that's certainly something we'd be concerned with.
Well, I guess a constituent suggested that maybe we put up some kind of signage so people are aware of why they can't use it and when they can't use it. So if that's not there yet, maybe that would be a good addition. Thank you.
Certainly.
I yield.
Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, say my children used to race BMX. They don't race anymore, but I'm pretty familiar with the sport. And the damage we're talking about that can occur is pretty significant when you're talking about a muddy track and bicycles. They leave really deep divots, and it makes the track pretty much unrideable till it can be fixed, which makes it, a lot of labor intensive, as opposed to just a grass field that, you basically can, it's just grass. I mean, you can be damaged, but usually not that significantly just by running around on it. So I can understand the concerns of the organization, that they put a lot of man hours, and as does everybody for their particular sports fields. And I think that as people look at this, they'll realize it's not nearly as restrictive or as, a big a deal as it's being portrayed as right now. I think that they'll find that there's still plenty of chances to use their facilities and keep them safe from damage. And I think that we really obviously want to encourage people to use them correctly, and so we're not going to have a free-for-all, hopefully, anywhere. And limiting access to things that can be damaged is nothing unusual. We obviously lock our pools at night, or we lock all of our facilities, our public buildings at nighttime. So I don't see that being a big issue, and I appreciate the Parks and Rec's efforts to work with these various organizations and reassure them. And I'm guaranteeing that they'll have many phone calls in the future, and I'm sure that they'll handle those perfectly, and they'll work with each individual facility and board and to allay those fares, hopefully. So I appreciate the efforts by the Parks and Rec and the legal department and everybody else that's reached out to me and let you know that your voice was heard, obviously. And once again, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me personally if you need to, or to Parks and Rec, and they can usually address those questions pretty well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion for approval for item 10. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Item 18 is next, and that's to acknowledge the January 2019 General Fund Cash Balance Report. We'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to acknowledge and retain the floor if I can get a second.
Second.
Second by Darla Drew. Go ahead.
Thank you. And may I ask Pauline Sumption a couple questions, please?
Yes.
Thanks. So Pauline, this is the general fund cash balance. And looking at January, for the total, there's no designated, which in previous years there was a designated. Could you explain why there's no designated in January for this year?
You bet. This was the year, one of the years that when we approved the budget, we did not include any cash, undesignated cash, to help fund that budget.
Okay, thank you. And so the other way for undesignated cash to get onto this report is the stuff that we carry over for projects or for payments that are going to be made and have to be added to the 2019 budget?
There will be some carryover items, and then there have been times where you have supplemented the budget and there might be a grant as a funding source, and so they're not all funded from undesignated cash, but any of the carryovers typically are.
Okay. So, and the reason I ask that is this currently shows as of January that based on our reserve structure, we're already into the reserves, and so our cash balance is over $1 million short as of the end of January, and here we are the end of February. There's also an item coming up on the calendar tonight for supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2019 that's going to add, and it's roughly about $149,000 out of undesignated cash. Would that show up in this designated, or is that a small enough amount we'll just carry it forward?
No, it'll show up once the ordinance is effective, so 20 days after publication it'll show up on one of these.
Okay, so that's the type of thing besides the budget using undesignated cash to be balanced. Those are the types of items that will start building under this fund on the designated cash portion to be subtracted from our cash balance.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple more questions for Pauline, if I may.
Okay.
Thank you. Pauline, I'm looking at the yearly general fund cash balance for the years 2000 to present. I'm looking at the column where it addresses the year 2018 in January of 2018. It shows undesignated cash with a negative 2.5 million, and now this year it's at 1.5 million. Do we need to raise any red flags? Do we have to be raising any more awareness? Do we have to do some more adjustments through these months? And then I'm also looking at 2017, we had a 3.8 million deficit. Is there any red flags that we have to put up?
While we monitor this every month, I guess I wouldn't get too excited currently. We do typically have a lot of expenditures in January, right off the bat, like all of our insurances come out in January. While we'll continue to monitor it, something that crossed my mind when you were asking the question is, I believe it was maybe the first year that Sean Kurbanoff was here, and we talked about adopting a formal reserve policy, not only what the reserves should be, but how we should build it back up should we dip into those reserves, and that's something that we should probably bring forward again.
Thank you, I would agree. And I'll just stand by and see what you folks bring up. Thank you, I'll yield.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to acknowledge item 18. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and now before we move on, unless the council objects, I'd like to go backwards just a half a step. We had a late speaker request form from Brad Lee on item 11. Mr. Lee, are you here? So this is an item you may have seen. This is an item that the council has already voted on, but we'd be glad to hear you anyway.
Thank you. And I apologize, I was in speaking with Mr. Landine and Jeff about this, but good evening, my name's Brad Lee. I live at 6675 Berwick Court. I'm the Vice President of Canyon Lake Little League, and I'm here on behalf of the league to voice our objections to the proposed use agreement between the city and Canyon Lake Little League. Specifically, we are objecting to Section 5 of the proposed use agreement because this provision mandates that Canyon Lake Little League allow other organizations to use their fields during the priority use season, during our season. It also forbids them from locking their fields up in the off-season. To give you some context, we have 400 players in our league, which means that we have 40 teams approximately that we have to find ways to schedule practices and games on only 7 fields in a short period of time. In addition to that, this year Canyon Lake League is in charge of several very big tournaments. We're in charge of the D1 All-Star 12-year-old tournament, the sub-district tournament. We're also in charge of the 12-year-old All-Star State tournament, and we're in charge of a new tournament put on by Little League International involving the top 2 teams from North Dakota playing the top 2 teams from South Dakota in the 10 and 11-year-old division, again at Canyon Lake. We have an extremely busy year. For those of you that don't know, Canyon Lake Little League is in charge of a lot when it comes to these fields. We are in charge for doing and paying for the mowing, the fertilizing, the spraying, the irrigation, upkeep and maintenance of the structures, and the utilities. We've calculated, I think conservatively, in the past 40 years, Canyon Lake families have contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to upkeep this facility and make it as presentable and a great facility that we have. The problem that we have with this use mandate is that it'll certainly result in confrontations going forward. The problems that we can see envisioning allowing other organizations to use our fields during the facility is that these groups are not invested in our fields. We literally put hundreds and hundreds of man-hours into maintaining these fields. And if we have an organization that's using our fields and has no investment in it, what incentive do they have to fix the field or repair it after they get done using it? The way the language is worded in this agreement, it's extremely vague. When I read through this, one of my questions is, do these organizations, are they allowed to use the structures on the facility? Because when you look at the map, it includes our structures. It includes our concession stand, the bathrooms, the batting shed. Are these facilities that they're allowed to use based on approval of this use agreement? If so, do Canyon Lake people need to give them the keys or passwords to use these facilities? Or do we need to have people available to open and close the facilities for them? What's going to happen when these things are broken and left in disrepair? I'd submit to you that's probably going to be a burden that falls to Canyon Lake families again. We're in charge of the utilities, so when they use our facilities, are we required to pay for the additional costs of lights and power that they use? And what is a bona fide use? What if there's a situation where, for example, these big tournaments we have, We don't want the fields to be used because we want them to look good for when the tournament starts, so we don't want wear and tear. Is that a bona fide use? The other question is, as I read the language in this agreement, I wouldn't see anything in there preventing other leagues from using our practice facilities. Now, I wouldn't think that they would do it, but arguably Harney, Timberloin, Rushmore, they could come and have practices and games on our fields if they wanted to, according to this language in the agreement. If the commission and the council is not willing to exclude this language that makes it mandatory and instead goes back to allow it to be discretionary for Canyon Lake to allow people to use the fields, then in the alternative, we would ask that you exclude Collins Field from this list and these requirements. Collins Field is one of the best Little League fields in this region. It's fenced in, and we've spent countless hours and money to keep that facility as one of the best in the state. In addition, if we're required to unlock all of our fields, including Canyon Lake, we store all of our equipment in there that we use to maintain our fields. So we would have to either purchase another place to store this equipment or find somewhere else to put it. Again, it's another burden and cost on Canyon Lake, who's already done quite a lot for these fields. Lastly, I would say that if you did exclude Collins from the list of fields that are subject to this new use agreement, it's not going to harm the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here through this act. We have 6 other fields that we are more than happy to allow other people to use. It's just that Collins Field is different. We are required to do special time to train people to take care of it. And lastly, the only other extension I would request is that we move the priority use season from ending on August 1st to have it be October 1st. The reason why is at the beginning of August, we are now having tournaments there. The tournament that the Little League International asked us to host is at the start of August. In addition, Canyon Lake Little League is going to offer what we like to call fall ball to our members, meaning for those baseball kids that want to continue playing past July, we're going to give them the opportunity to play into August and hopefully through September, depending on the weather. So we ask that that be modified for the priority use season, as I commented earlier. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I'd remit my time.
Thank you. Chad Lewis has a comment.
Just would like to reiterate, Mr. Mayor, if I could, please, that this is not something the city has come up with out of the blue to try to restrict usage. It's something we have no choice but to do. Is that correct, Mr. Bigler? Obviously, so we're not looking to try to stop people from using their facilities, or, it's just we don't have a choice. If the federal funds were used for this purpose, the stipulation of using the funds is they have to be opened. But I would also argue, sir, that, or not argue, but just maybe point out that it also says that the Parks and Rec can deny usage if anybody wants to use this, and I imagine that they're pretty protective as well. And Canyon Lake Little League is hardly the only organization that puts in money to maintenance of facilities in this town. This town also pays for all the water for all these parks. So just a reminder of that the city does do a lot to make sure these facilities are taken care of, and we obviously want everybody to take care of their facilities. We want them all in the best shape as possible. But there's just certain parcels of land and parks that have been funded by federal funds, and we have no choice. We'd be in violation of the funding, and we'd have to provide an alternative field for those people to be on as part of the stipulation. So our hands are completely tied in that situation. I would say that I don't think it's going to be the problem anybody thinks it's going to be. Obviously, baseball and your league is obviously the #1 priority for that field, and I don't think they're going to be having, letting Rushmore go over there and start using your fields. They have their own facilities. Harney has their own facilities. I mean, I'm pretty confident and the people at the Parks and Rec understand all this, and they've been more than willing to work with the individual organizations to maintain, to make sure their fields and their facilities are taken care of. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I know you guys have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and money into these fields and this, but I want you to make sure you understand this is just something that's nothing we can do about it as far as the requirements of the federal money. That's just something surely you can understand as an attorney, that there's just certain things our hands are tied. We're doing our best to make it work, though, and work with everybody, and I assure you that's going to continue to be the case. So if you have any concerns, your organization has, I'll be more than willing to discuss them with you or talk to your organization as a whole. So I appreciate your input, and it is a very valid point, but I appreciate your work, too. Thank you.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this item back in play?
No, this item's been voted on, but the speaker missed, Mr. Lee missed his opportunity by a couple minutes, so that's why we afforded it.
Could I, yeah, I need to ask Joel Landine a question. So Joel, with these facilities, is post-22 under this same arrangement? Are they expected to, do they get money from this fund? And they're
I can't
expected-
answer that. I don't know what all the parcels are. I haven't actually worked on these agreements, and this was the first I've heard there was an issue. So frankly, I think at this point, it was approved. I think we need to look at it. Nothing requires the organizations to sign these use agreements, but clearly there's some things they have concern about, and I think we need, I need to ask my staff that worked on it how much wiggle room, if any, we have, and I think there's some valid concerns. Maybe it doesn't need, or maybe it doesn't require that we adopt a different agreement, but perhaps we need to have some policies or understandings about some of those issues, like concession stands. I don't think anybody would think that they're required to open a concession stand or that we have to provide access to their concession stand where they're storing their stuff. But that's what we need to maybe clarify before you're authorizing these agreements in this form.
And
If
they're-
after we get an understanding of how this will work, and maybe we can do that through some policies and written understandings, then maybe the groups will sign the agreements. If after that, there's still issues and they're not willing to sign the agreement, then we may have to bring something back to you. But I'm hoping that this maybe can be solved behind the scenes now that we're aware there's an issue.
I hope so too, because I think Collins might be an exception to this particular use agreement, or if other leagues have those kinds of places where they're storing a lot of valuable equipment and don't want to store that off-site, it might be a place where we can have some wiggle room. And so I don't want to belabor this, so I yield. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We're through consent calendar and now starting on ordinances with item 33. We'll open public comment on items 33 through 45. We have quite a few speaker requests on item 33, so everyone who filled out a form, here's how we'll do this tonight. I'll call your name, and you have 3 minutes when you start talking, and you watch these lights up here. They're just like a traffic light, yellow, green, yellow, and red. And so I would also ask you, since there's a number of you speaking on the same item, that you not repeat the person before you and just try to agree with them rather than speak through the whole thing. So first, pick the hardest one first. I don't know how to pronounce your first name, so I will say Miss Mendoza. Mr. Mendoza. How do you say your first name?
Tuswecha.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
How matakiapi Tuswecha ta Onia Lawrence Mendoza macha lona ha chantewash dewi na Jeju japelo. I give thanks that you guys are giving your time to let me speak and say my truth, and I apologize for speaking in front of the elders. And I would like to talk about the ordinance, the panhandling ordinance, and I am against this because I feel that that is dehumanizing. And in one of the sections in the, I don't know what to call it, but it says annoy or molest a person, and I feel just annoy is dehumanizing. And with this, I don't want to cause any more suffering to the people who are going through suffering at the moment, and specifically with the fine, something that they cannot ever probably pay off. And I just feel that this is wrong and want to make sure that the people who aren't able to come out here is able to have a voice. And I'm glad to do anything to make sure that these people are able to have a safe and healthy experience in Rapid City, and I want to make sure that these voices are heard. And thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next, Carissa Lowen. Carissa Lowen.
Hello. Thank you to all council representatives for all your work and considering all the input from the community and from everybody that you hear from on this issue. I asked one of my council representatives if they could request data on the previous ordinance that is being repealed by this ordinance. That was called aggressive solicitation ordinance. Because I feel like we've been told by the council at the last meeting that this ordinance is not intended to target any particular racial group. However, there's an implementation and enforcement question. Who is going to be affected by this ordinance? And I think it's helpful to look at how these types of ordinances have been enforced in the past and who has been targeted. And so I hope that that information can come forward today, and that even if it doesn't say in this ordinance that this is directed at Native people, the actions speak greater than the words. So what is going to be the result of this? And who is going to be hurt from this? The other question I have is, last time when we spoke here, we were told that people who can't afford to pay fines will not be given a fine. That's not stated in the ordinance. If that's really your intention, I want that in writing. I think the council needs to amend this because the community does not necessarily trust that just because that might happen. I think it was said, well, it could. That's often what happens, I think, is what was said. That needs to be clear. Also, I don't understand how jail time is going to solve the behavioral issues. So the question to me is, what is the need, what is the data that supports the need for this ordinance? I understand that there are businesses downtown that have concerns. There are people that have had uncomfortable interactions or feel threatened. How is this ordinance going to actually solve that problem? Will it solve that problem? What will be the result? Additional jail time, getting picked up by the police and put in jail, does not solve this problem. And I've done a lot of reading on this issue. I want people to know that these ordinances addressing panhandling, I understand you've taken that language out, but in the past those ordinances started cropping up around the country at the exact same time that affordable housing started becoming less available. So this is a homelessness issue, is what this is. That's the only way that the problem will be solved. So I want you to, I am going to ask the council to delay a vote on this because I think that there's more that our community needs to look into. There's more that needs to be considered on this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ramona Harrington.
Okay, good evening and thank you for your time. I want to start out by reading a Seattle University Law Review, Volume 41, Criminalization of Panhandling in Washington. In response to the above constitutional and policy issues, legislatures are encouraged to repeal their aggressive begging laws in their entirety. At minimum, legislatures should modify their aggressive begging laws by 1, repealing provisions that provide vague perception-based components of reasonable fear and compulsion that cater to well-established societal biases and prejudices about the homeless and visibly poor. 2, repealing any conduct, time, and place provisions that are substantially similar to the provisions that courts have already invalidated as insufficiently tailored to serve a compelling public safety interest. And 3, repealing any provisions that restrict conduct already prohibited by existing content-neutral laws, because aggressive begging laws are, at their very core, content-based discriminations on speech. These provisions are unconstitutional restrictions on speech. I became aware of a collective healing initiative. It's a grant program that the police department has established, and because of the historic trauma and within our area, and I'll read part. In order to promote collective healing, the police department must work with community members who have been harmed in the past or who have experienced historic trauma and hold a high level of distrust in the police department. To build trust with the community, the police department must demonstrate its willingness and ability to work with community partners to advance shared public safety goals. And I'm bringing this up because I think that we should have been, this ordinance should have been discussed with us, in the Native community, instead of bringing it to the council, if the true meaning of healing is the goal of this grant that you have brought to our community. And it's really disappointing that you came to the council to ask for our most needful people to be, and they're invisible until something happens to somebody, and it's usually you're more concerned for the tourists than you are to our people. So I just want you to know that it should have been brought to us first. Thank you.
Kente Hart.
Happy wash day, mi taki api. Chante wash day na pechi zapi. Kokik papi we machi api he. Mini luza ha alwati si changu oyate oyanke. Good evening, council and community members. My name is Chante Hart, and I am a mother. I am a community member here in Rapid City. I am also a student at Oglala Lakota College, and I recently am one of the emerging leaders for the new Collective Impact. And so I am just here today to speak on those who aren't able to speak for themselves. And I want you to know that Indigenous people in the streets are not homeless people, they're houseless people. These are their homelands. And so I believe that this ordinance, the way they're going about it, is not the way to end homelessness. These are people in crisis, and I think they need resources, they need help, they need services, they do not need jail time. And I'm just going to keep it at that. Thank you very much for listening. Mitakuyapi, pilamaya wapilatanka, mitakuya yasi.
Thank you. There's another Kante, but I can't read the last name, though.
Good evening. This is Chante Lame.
Lame, okay.
I'm her auntie. She just wants to talk about what's been going on with her in the city.
Yes. Hi, my name is Chante Lame, and I was speaking about the panhandling issue and how you guys do target us natives, and how when you guys do, the police do target us a lot by not letting us have like our freedom. Jail time is not really like what's meant for us young people. Us young folks just want a place to stay. With you guys putting us to jail, it makes us look bad. On top of it makes the housing look at us and everything. A lot of business look at us like we're nothing. It's hard to get jobs, and we just want to succeed in this world. We do not want to be bad influences. We don't want to be a bother to people. But when you throw out a young lady or a young man who is trying, and you see them struggling, and then you just put them at another struggle and another struggle. It's hard to pay off fines, and when we don't pay off fines, you try anything and everything to pay off that fine. Next thing you know, you're going to jail again. Next thing you know, when you do go to jail, you do get out. Next thing you know, you see officers just coming at you for no reason at all. You could be walking down the street. They're coming at you, asking a whole bunch of questions, trying to dig in your pockets, trying to smell your breath, trying to look at your drink that's not even an alcoholic beverage, pouring it out, saying like little things to scare us, but we're just trying to live, you know? You guys have your generation. This is our generation to succeed. We do watch the news. We do watch people around us. We do try to succeed, but when we have to go up to people to ask for money, we don't have a gun or a knife pointed to them. We're just asking for some little bit of pocket change, little bit of something to eat. But you guys don't see it like that. You profile us as drug heads, alcoholics. How do you know I just don't want a bite to eat? But automatically, oh, she's going to go buy drugs, or he's going to go buy drugs. How do you know? That's it.
Thank you. Next is Natalie Stites-Means.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you again. I spoke 2 weeks ago, and I, called this ordinance out for what I feel it is, which is blatantly racist against Native Americans, who are 70% of the homeless population here in the city, as you well know. And since then, I've reflected on some of the feedback that I've gotten and some of the internet, social media, and all that, and what my community has said. And I want to lay out, if it's not racist, then what is it? Well, it's short-sighted. The panhandling ordinances are being struck down all over the country because it infringes on people's constitutional free speech rights. And in the United States, money is free speech, too. How I use my money and how I am asked for money. That's free speech. Also, the big veneer is put upon this as though because you call behavior unlawful, that turns it magically into not an aggressive solicitation anti-panhandler ordinance. It doesn't change that. Also, I researched after I heard from Destination Racist City, this tourist campaign here, I looked it up. I looked up downtown Rapid City reviews on TripAdvisor. And guess what? Out of 2,040 reviews of downtown Rapid City, less than 10% were negative. And few of those even mentioned panhandlers and bums. And the people who did, I suspect they're racist. So I urge you to look into this matter further, to be wise and thoughtful, to read the literature, to Google the research. There's panhandlers.org. There's homeless advocacy in every city. There are homeless advocates here in our city. I don't hear them standing up for our people. That's okay. That's okay. The politics are thick here. One of the reasons why I can speak out is because I don't work for you all. That's why I can speak out. And I'm free to exercise my free speech rights. This is not an issue of panhandlers and tourism. This is attacking symptoms of the social issues that Rapid City faces. I took a look at your comprehensive plan or the Rapid City 2020, what we want to do, what the future is. I don't see incarcerating every panhandler as part of the plan. The people are suffering. They're the most victimized people in the city. They are victims of crime repeatedly. So this is anti-crime victim. This is anti-science and anti-data. This goes against all the literature we know of on trauma-informed responses and trauma-informed policing as well. And the tourism myth, it doesn't withstand scrutiny. Thank you very much for your time today.
Tonya stands.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tanya Stans. I'm a resident here of Rapid City, and I've had prior experience of being homeless here from a manager, a racist manager. And whatever I did everything to prevent it, paid all my bills, and I was targeted. So guess where I ended up with my children? And I'm not a drug user. I'm not an alcohol user. I serve this country. And you know, I ended up in a shelter, and I was homeless because of the racism. And I'm not proud of that. I did everything to prevent it. And so this brings a lot of emotion to me, because you know, we didn't have a car, and we had to walk the streets with my kids in this weather, in strollers, trying to get to a job, trying to get to the daycare, so we can get out of this targeted racial system. And so I was looking at this ordinance, and it talks about businesses located within the original town of Rapid, which is bordered by Omaha Street to the north, which is right here, and then the South Street on the southwest boulevard, and then East Boulevard. So this whole little area, which is original Rapid City, this area, I mean, when you think about it, hello, you know, you have the shelters right in that area. You have the jail right in that area. You have low income, you know, rent-based area. I mean, this is a homeless area. So, and the library, you know, and we're going over there to the detox, but there's a lot of traffic through here. And the people that are targeted, you know, that could have been me. I could have been targeted and come across a bad cop who didn't want to listen, and I've come across that a lot, 90% of my time. I avoid infractions with the cops. And I know my rights, and I know the law, and you could just have you can question them, one little question, and they'll flip. You know, I had an incident where a white, older male, about 19 years old, mental state, and he was targeting little boys in my community. And I called the cops on him because he was going to do something to a little boy, and nobody would stop him. And you know what happened? The cops flipped on me. They didn't want to attend to the guy. Instead, they flipped on me and wanted to haul me off to jail. I wasn't the one doing this to this child or doing that to the child. So it is targeting us. I mean, hello, you know, this is right in that area of homelessness, and allow them to get better, allow them to benefit. But this is not the way to handle it, by no means. Thank you.
Julie Santella.
Hi, my name is Julie Santella. Thank you for letting me speak. I live here in Rapid City, and I wanted to speak about the bias, the potential for bias that's introduced by this ordinance because of how vague it is. And the way that this is written, there's a lot of room for subjective judgment here. The reasonable person standard is only stated in Part B of this ordinance. It's not stated in A, C, or D. And even if it were stated in all of those subsections, there's a lot of research that's been done on the reasonable person standard that demonstrates how problematic that can be. And I want to read a bit also from the Seattle Law Review piece that I believe you all have in front of you, citing other places in the country where this kind of bias has been introduced and the results. And so on page 302, when little or no guidance is provided by the legislature regarding what objective conduct is prohibited, law enforcement is left open to rely on subjective perceptions. These subjective perceptions may include what a reasonable person would perceive as intent to intimidate. The implicit and explicit bias towards the homeless population, coupled with the prejudice that this population typically experiences, can produce feelings of discomfort, repulsion, and even fear. Thus, these laws can potentially lead to arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement and disproportionately criminalize people experiencing homelessness. There's further detail on this in Part A of this paper. And so, again, the concern here is that the vague way that this is written introduces potential for bias against homeless people. And we know that homeless people or houseless people in this city are disproportionately Native. We know that to be true. We know that this ordinance criminalizes homelessness by introducing the potential for jail time and a $500 fine, which is a massive increase from what the previous ordinance detailed. And we know that Native people are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system here. So if we know that this ordinance would criminalize homelessness, we know that homeless people are disproportionately Native, and we know that the criminal justice system already targets Native people, then how it's pretty clear that this ordinance would continue those trends. And so I would urge you all to, I think a few people have said this, it's disappointing that more conversation hasn't happened on this with the folks who stand to bear the consequences of this ordinance if it were passed. And so I would just urge you all to take a step back and allow for more time to hear from people, members of the Rapid City community who have serious concerns about this, and hear those concerns meaningfully before moving forward with this. Thank you.
Chase Iron Eyes.
Good to see you. Kola Yuha Chichab, Chase Iron Eyes Imachabi. I want to say thank you for the work that you do. You know, my mother moved here when she was a child. When she was about 8 years old, she moved into what was called Oshkosh Camp, or Indian Camp, which was essentially our people, the original civilizers of the area, having to come to this city as if we were migrant workers. She moved into a camp with my uncle, whose last name was Red Horse, and soon enough, the city pushed them out of those two camps and pushed them into what became Suadition, or Lakota homes. I'm telling you this because it's relevant to know that our prosperity was never contemplated by your predecessors. We were moved to Suadition forcibly, and utilities were not hooked up to Suadition. My mom and those who were moved with her had to haul water from Rapid Creek all the way to Suadition. Homelessness is a function of poverty. In our society, poverty is a function of forced dependence. It's no accident that Lakota people are meant to beg. this has been the space that we've occupied in the American imagination. You get to occupy a space where your ancestors are hardy. They're brave, brilliant, healthy, risk-taking pioneers whose destiny was manifest. And all you had to do was come out into this other place where primitive, uncivilized savages lived. And this is what our schools teach us. Poverty is relevant now because though we make up 12% of this city's population, not only are we the majority of the homeless, we're the majority of the inmates. And Mayor Allender, you made a comment that this wasn't about crazy white people. This is not about Mexicans, men or women, but there was a pattern, a demonstrable pattern that these were Native American people. So you challenged tribal leadership. Many of those leaders are sitting in here today. President Bear Runner stands ready to engage your office, Chief Jegaris, in a creative solution that involves perhaps the allocation of the hundreds of millions of tax dollars that we bring to this city so we can use it to prevent this bad optics. We're engaging in bad optics here. I don't want to go too far over my time, so thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, Kurt Small.
My name's Kurt Small. I've had the privilege of operating and owning the Elks Theater for the last 25 years downtown. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to take just a second and publicly thank the Rapid City Police Department, especially those officers that you have assigned downtown. Those folks consistently show professionalism and composure in some of the ugliest situations, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. I'd also like to commend the City Council and the community as a whole for the efforts that they've made for our homeless population and those that have drug and alcohol addictions. The CARE campus, I toured it before it opened. It's an amazing facility, and I just heard the numbers of the amount of people that it serves so far, and congrats on that. Nice job. I'm here to voice my complete support for this ordinance. As I was reading through it a couple weeks ago, literally every paragraph, I could cite a dozen examples of how this ordinance would have dealt with issues that I've had at my business, from my staff having to lock their doors because there's somebody banging on the side glass, to my customers, their vehicles being approached in the middle lane at a red light downtown and having somebody bang on their glass. It's a public safety issue at that point in time. I'm not going to cite all those examples, but I am going to tell you about something that happened last night because it's pretty relevant to this conversation. We had a gentleman out in front of our building that was aggressively panhandling to the point where he was blocking some customers of mine from coming in. When my staff recognized what was going on, they went out to confront him. It turned into a physical altercation. The cops showed up. This gentleman also assaulted the police officer and obviously was hauled off to jail. The reason I bring this one up is because the couple that was trying to get into my business was a Native American couple. The gentleman that was blocking them was a Caucasian. This ordinance targets threatening behavior and nothing else. I've read through it twice. I think it's the exact type of ordinance we need to keep this behavior out of downtown Rapid City. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Dan Tribby.
Good evening. My name is Dan Tribby, and I'm the general manager of Prairie Edge. Just a little bit of background. I came down to Rapid City and started working in downtown about 22 years ago. And at that time, almost with the exception of Prairie Edge and the Sioux Trading Post, a person had to travel around quite a bit to find very many Native people working in Rapid City at the time. And I'm just really, really proud of where things have come today, not without plenty of strife, but now it's almost the opposite. It's almost impossible to go into a business in Rapid City where there are not Native American either employees, people working on every level of management, and a huge increase in Native-owned businesses. That being said, what I'd really like to bring forward tonight aren't my concerns, not the business's concerns, but it's the concerns of my employees, all of my employees for sure, because we live in this environment where we're open 360 out of 365 days a year. My employees, both Native and non-Native, have dealt with every positive and every negative aspect of working in the downtown area. But I do really want to talk about my Native employees because I think they're the best that there is. These people, men and women, have started out with nothing more than anybody else, but they have absolutely worked their tails off to improve their place, and they've been very, very successful in this. I have more Native American managers in Prairie Edge now than I have non-Native American managers. These guys, and I forget the young lady's name, who talked so passionately about wanting the chance to succeed. And that's where my employees are at. And they asked me to come and talk tonight and represent their concerns because they are trying to succeed. And the hindrance of people, let's face it, and I'm going to try not to go over my time, but when Native American employees come to me, it's almost like they have an extra burden of past history of stereotypes that are so unbelievably unfair. So when they come to work for us, they're going to do their job. And then they're going to do a little bit extra to offset those stereotypes. And that is what they related to me, is how hard they are trying. When our customers come in after being accosted on the street and go, this isn't how our people, this isn't our people. This isn't what represents our people. I've had artists, and you folks, I'm trying to talk to the council, but I'm really talking to you folks. And if I get choked up on this, we deal with the folks every day. I've had to go to funerals for my friends who ended up under a bridge. I didn't know they fell through the cracks. I didn't know they fell through the cracks. I bought artwork from people one day, and 3 days later I found out that the wake is happening at Mother Butler. And the reason that I support this ordinance, if any one of these people can have the chance today to get pulled off the street and be able to sell me artwork and come and see me in a week and not end up going under, then this ordinance can help people. I could talk to you for a long time about this, but folks, Rapid City has come out for one reason, and it is things like the Hope Center. It's the things like the Care Center that Kurt talked about. I work with Officer Henson, who has told me how many people came off the street, turned themselves in voluntarily because they want to get better. And really at the end of this deal, nobody's going to get better unless people want to change that behavior. And if they can come forward and get that help, and the city is doing a good job allotting those funds. I have to applaud the people for wanting help. I want to applaud the people of the city for making those things available, that help available, whatever that is. And I hope more people can somehow get into that system and be able to take advantage of that. And that is why I support this. And I'm sorry for going over on my time.
Okay, thank you, and that'll take us to the end of our public comment time. We'll start now back on the agenda with ordinances. Item number 33, second reading ordinance 6303, an ordinance to repeal section 9.08.020 of the Rapid City Municipal Code and enact and amend provisions concerning certain behaviors that are a public safety risk. Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to make a motion to approve this. If I could get a second, I'd like to retain the floor.
Second.
Thank you.
Second by Nordstrom.
For discussion. And I make this motion because we're in our second reading. We've had a lot of conversation. We've been listening to everyone. We truly have. This, I think, Dan, and what he stated is he put the problem back forward into what we have in our community, what we have in our heart, in our chanti of our community. And that is a heartbeat that is hurt, it's broken, it aches, and it's in trouble. And we've got to find some solutions, human solutions. And when we have those that are not having a behavior issue, then there's no breaking of laws, there's no arrest, there's no problem. But when it goes into aggressive behavior, when we experience the aggressive behavior, somebody is also encroaching on the rights of somebody else. And that's where the freedom is then no longer respected. And it is a matter of respect. We need to respect each other. We need to respect each other if we're on the street, if we're walking, if we're sitting, if we're shopping. We need to take care of each other. And that respect is what we need to all do just as an everyday. It shouldn't have to be an ordinance to tell us how we should behave. But when it goes into the aggressive, when it crosses the line, we have to have some kind of order. And that would be Rapid City, I would imagine, as well as our tribes. We have to stay focused on the behaviors so that everybody is cared for, is safe, is secure, and is working towards their success, our own individual success, which will come out of us. And one of the things that I also appreciated in the statements from Mr. Trivia is that this council and its mayor and its officers, and under the guidance of our leadership and our chief, are working very hard to create an environment where somebody can go to be safe, to get food, to get shelter, to get out of -2 degrees. It's why our care center is so busy. It's why that campus is taking in people. It was built for that. We're all behind that. We're putting dollars behind that. We're giving a place for shelter and food and clothing. And it's growing, where we've got lots of plans. Our future is great, but it starts now. We have to come together. We need the leadership of everybody, not independent, because we're never going to get the solutions if we try to do this as an independent movement. Right now, we probably have people that are hungry. And if we gathered after work, after this, we could go down and feed a lot of people. That's something we could do every day independently on our own, take care of each other. That's not racist and that's not color-bound. It's just care. We have to put order into our community. We have to keep it orderly. So I make this motion on the second reading because it's got value. It's got value to you, it's got value to the people that live here, and it has value to the people that come here, that want to come to Rapid City and the Black Hills, our precious, precious Black Hills. So I would hope you would understand that we do understand, we do know, and we want to be good stewards of our community, and we also want to keep you safe as well. Thank you.
Laura Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming out to speak. I think you're very brave, you're very passionate, and I think it's important for us to see the entire picture of what's going on. Secondly, I want to agree with Mrs. Modrick for most of what she said, so thank you for your words. But also I'd like to have Chief Jagras be able to weigh in on this and explain some of the issues, or actually address some of the questions and comments that were made by the public. I only think it's fair for him to weigh in on this because obviously this affects him as well as all of us. So if I may, Chief Jagras, again, you and I have been exhaustively talking the last couple weeks, as well as I've been talking with city legal as well, just to make sure that we are not racially profiling anybody. And I would like you to possibly speak on this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you.
So a few things in response to some of the comments that were made. First off, it was asserted that many of the homeless or houseless are invisible to those of us in the community that are non-native. And I will just tell you that from a law enforcement standpoint, and I think I could probably speak on behalf of our fire department, the homeless population is certainly not invisible to us. We are there every day as 24/7 caretakers. The Collective Healing Initiative, I will tell you that that is going very well. One of the primary fruits that is derived from that is our ability to stand up the quality of life unit, and that unit is working in a boots on the ground social work capacity to truly get to the root causes of some of the most vulnerable in our community struggles, and we're having success. We're very early on in that unit, but I think it's a change in philosophy for our department, and I think that we are leading by example very well with that effort. You know, through that process, we have got to meet many of our Lakota leaders, and I can tell you that there's many different thoughts regarding how to handle some of the behavior issues that really put people at risk. And I can tell you that by continuing to enable a very dangerous lifestyle, there's nobody there to pick up the deceased outside of law enforcement, the fire department, the emergency room personnel, and it is happening. It is very, very sad. I'll tell you that we are transitioning to trauma-informed policing, which is to create a lens of greater understanding. There's no way that we can fully understand the history of each individual in our community, but I can assure you that our officers take the brunt of a lot of historic anger that occurs in our community on a daily basis. And that anger, at the moment that we're in that conflict, doesn't seem relevant at times to our officers. We're unaware of where it's coming from. And so I'm looking forward to expanding to 100% of our staff, both sworn and non-sworn personnel, deep understanding of the historic trauma that has occurred in our community. I believe that it will cause an elevation in compassion. I believe that many times we have an opportunity to kind of pause what we're doing, and I believe that we can de-escalate most situations. But I will also tell you that we already do de-escalate most situations. I want to remind you, this is a little repetitive from 2 weeks ago, but enforcement is only used when we exhaust all other means. And as you all know, the city and the county, led by the police department, the sheriff's office, have worked to create the Care Campus. And again, we have 60 admits per night average, and we're early on in that process as well, but that is going extremely well. As far as reducing incarceration and using the jail as a tool against those that are most vulnerable, I am in agreement with almost everything that has been said, but I will tell you that there are a few individuals that will really become aggressive, will push back against police intervention, and will not allow us to keep them safe. And so I would forecast that the ordinance will be used very minimally. I remind you that the current ordinance in effect by the City Attorney's Office has been deemed unconstitutional. We do need to repeal it. I think that your message tonight on whether or not we replace it with the suggested language that has been thoroughly researched by our City Attorney's Office sends a message to our staff of confidence in the challenging work that we do each and every day. We deserve a clear message from our City Council. We will continue to work with the community, and I encourage respectful dialogue and look forward to any other questions that you might have.
I'm out of time, but I also just wanted to say, lastly, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I'm not talking very well this evening. We have body cameras in place, which keeps everybody honest, and I think everybody on this dais understands that this ordinance is not intended for any racial profiling. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You okay there? All right, let's make sure Typhoid Mary's all right. All right, so, you know, we've been talking a lot about racism here, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like racism doesn't exist in Rapid City. It's obviously a huge issue, actually. And, you know, I think that we've been trying to address it a little more. And in fact, we're having to have this conversation is, I think, a good start on some levels. But it was brought up that, you know, the council shouldn't have brought this shouldn't have been brought forth to the council. It should have been taken forth to, you know, people. Well, speaking of racism, I can't think of anything more racist than saying, hey, we're going to bring forth this new law that's going to, you know, start prosecuting people for doing something, but let's bring it to you. I mean, I would be like, I would think that would be an insult if someone was to say this law is going to directly affect you the most. I think that's, you know, making an assumption right there that, you know, I understand the disproportionate amount of Native Americans that are homeless, but I think that would be something I would perceive at least insulting if I was on the receiving end of that message. So, but I think when I think of this particular ordinance, I think of downtown Denver. I don't know if anybody goes to Denver very often, but 16th Street Mall has become pretty much a place I don't take my children anymore. I mean, you get approached down there constantly. And I suppose a lot of it's just, you know, because people are looking for whatever money, but it's, you know, it's annoying. And I don't feel safe down there with my little kids. I mean, my kids are younger, so, I understand that. I don't want Rapid City to become like that. I don't think it's, you know, a good message, you know, a good way to treat out-of-towners or anybody for that matter. If people walk down the street. And so I think, you know, I haven't personally experienced much of, a little bit, but much what's going on, but I do have to listen to the people that experience this, work downtown on a daily basis, you know, and they do bring this up quite a bit. And, you know, when I think of, I'm obviously not in law enforcement, but the chief alluded to it, and I would have to believe that they don't want to arrest anybody because it's really messy. I mean, it takes time. You got to file the paperwork. You got to process them, get them through the system, and then you got to go, I don't know exactly what the follow-up is. I assume there's a part we got to testify or whatever, but, you know, I think it's more of a deterrent. So once this happens once or twice, people will, you know, maybe it'll cut down on some of the behavior. And we do have to give our officers the ability to, you know, I mean, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, folks, and we have most of the general population wants to stay safe. So we have police officers that do the job that most of us don't want to do, and they have to have those tools in their toolbox to be able to somehow to do that and protect people. And, you know, they do have the body cameras, like Laura's saying. So now, I mean, I understand that I'm not pretending there's not racist cops or racist incidents that happen out there. I have no idea. I'm not in that. Obviously, I'm a white guy. I don't know for sure what that would feel like. But I think the body cameras go a long ways to documenting those things nowadays, and it makes it much more transparent. So I would say that, you know, some of the conversation was Mr. Iron said something about, you know, using some of the tax dollars to fix some of these problems. Well, I think we've taken a huge step forward in that regard as a city with the Care Center and the One Heart and a couple other programs that are going on right now. And I will tell you right now, the three biggest advocates for those particular programs are the sheriff, police chief, and the former mayor, who's a former police chief. Now, those guys have been out there, they've interacted more than any of us ever have, you know, with various, and they're doing their best to try to help the homeless. They really want that to happen, and they're and advocating spending millions of dollars. I think we advocated something like $8.1 million this year out of our Visions funding. I'm not saying that's going to fix the problem, and I'm not saying that we're here by any means going to take care of it all tonight, but I want you to know that this body and these administrators have done their best to at least step that direction. And I want you to know, I understand you're shaking your head, but I can tell you I don't know what else I can do, but I do have to protect the many out there. That's not my job, but I have to give the police the ability to do that. And I do try to work on the backside and to support the folks that are trying to solve the problem. I mean, what's the other solution? The other solution is to do nothing, and I don't think that's obviously an option. So I applaud, you know, those that are trying to take care of it, and obviously you have a voice that, you know, needs to be heard. I welcome it, and I think we're obviously got a lot more work to do. And I mean, we talk about this all the time, but I think there's some steps being taken, and so I definitely appreciate those who are doing that. Thank you.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Joel Landine, please.
Yes.
So, Joel, in your experience when you were looking at this ordinance or doing research on it, did you find that other communities have had to repeal their aggressive behavior ordinances?
Yeah, I think that's why we're advocating that we repeal ours. When you tie it to solicitation, when you tie it to the asking for money, I think it's pretty clear that's unconstitutional, which is what our previous ordinance did. So after researching it, Kinsley Group in my office made some recommendations, and at this point, we feel this is the best ordinance. This is going to be found to be constitutionally viable, and that this is really at this point the best we can do based on the cases. But you know, there's new cases coming out. Frankly, a lot of this is all based on a decision that happened about 2 or 3 years ago. So that put all the aggressive solicitation ordinances in question, and previously they had generally been upheld, but now they are being struck down, which is why we informed the police department we felt our ordinance was not constitutional and how we got to this point today. So, you know, I've seen this described as an expansion of our enforcement powers. What we really view this as is replacing the ordinance that was already on the books with one that's compliant with law.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I just have a couple comments. This is not going to stop anybody from asking for money. I mean, in every city in the world, you can't go anywhere. There's not people somewhere that are in need of money and just simply ask for it, you know, whether politely or not even engaging someone, just have something sitting in front of them, you know, help me out. I mean, it happens everywhere. What we're trying to stop here is the aggressive solicitation, which might even help some of our homeless. Because if these are aggressive people, they are also probably taking advantage of our most vulnerable populations. So hopefully we can get them off the street and save some of the homeless people from having to deal with some people that are very aggressive. And that doesn't matter. That's all racist. You know, we have aggressive people, you know, across the board, and you guys know that. Trauma is real. Historical trauma is real. I understand it, and I know it. I don't know it from your perspective, but I believe in it, and I think that if our police are working towards understanding some of the things that as a people you've gone through, and that sticks with generations and makes anger and communication a little bit more difficult, I think we can work towards that and maybe get somewhere, because trauma is real. And that's a hard thing for a lot of us to comprehend, that can be generational, that can be handed down, but it is. So I'm hoping that this will not cause any more discomfort for the people that are homeless and on the street and just asking for money. I know you say it will, I know. But right now, it's the best that we've got. And I think in practice, it will help some of the people. It will probably protect some of the folks from actually getting hassled by the people that are aggressive. And hopefully that this will move us towards a more civilized society. I hope, okay? And we do have the cameras, we do have those things. So, you know, there's people up here that you can reach out to, and you can say, hey, I know this is not happening like you said it would, Darla. So just remember that. If you need to talk to me, you can, because I will be open to listening anytime if you find that this is not working. And I make that promise. So thank you, and I'll be supporting this. But I don't think it's the best we can do. I really don't. I just think it's a beginning. Thank you.
Jason Solomon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I direct a question to our police chief, please?
Yes.
Chief, we heard a comment about, I think it was Darla that just said, and I've heard this before, that often it's our homeless population that are the victims of the aggressive behavior. So most of our homeless folks, or houseless, I thought that was a good way to put it, are good people. They've fallen on difficult times and they're struggling and they're just trying to get through. But there are those, even within that community, who may be the aggressors to fellow homeless community members. Is that backed up by what your experiences are in law enforcement?
Well, yeah, we do see a lot of victimization amongst the homeless population, a lot of which is perpetrated by fellow homeless individuals. I think that when the intoxication levels get higher, the frequency and the gravity of the violence is increased. And again, another reason why we need to end the cycle of continued inebriation. I can tell you very clearly that typically panhandling cash goes to alcohol in most cases. And in rare cases where it wouldn't, where it would go to food or other resources, we have those options available through established social service organizations in our community. We're very fortunate here in Rapid City. We have a lot of generous community members and charitable organizations.
Thank you. You know, I want you to know you were heard tonight, and that the vote may not go the way that you want, but I want you to know that you were heard. There were some really meaningful comments that were made, and one thing that is clear to me, that beyond this behavior-based ordinance that we're talking about, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And my hope, even beyond this, is that the conversations are still had and progress is still made, not just to serve those in the homeless community, but also just to bring our community together and so that we can live in harmony. That's what we should want. We should want to live in harmony with one another. And this is an ordinance not based on race, but based on the fact that we all have to live together. What are the rules that we're all willing to say you can and can't do? If this what I understand is this ordinance allows somebody to say, hey, can I have $1? Can I have $5? And that there's no problem. And if that was in the ordinance, we'd be having a different discussion up here. But instead, if you say, can I have $5? No. And, well, I'm going to block your way, or I'm going to crowd around you, or I'm going to follow you to your car, or whatever those kind of cases may be, regardless of who you are. That's what we're talking about. And so, because the language in here does not target any protected class that I can tell, but it really goes after behavior. And that's what we have to focus on. But the idea that we're really talking about, and what I can hear, is there's deeper issues here than whether this ordinance should be in place. There's deeper issues that we need to continue to talk about. We have to live together. We are all brothers and sisters. I mean, and I think that's what I'm hearing today is really there's a broken heart. There's progress that I'm hopeful for, but there are people on all sides who want to be a part of the solution and come together. And I heard that tonight. I hope that will continue. But as for this ordinance tonight that we're talking about, because of the language that I see in here, because of the kind of people that we have in leadership, and because of the legal counsel that we have, and because I know this body up here are a bunch of caring people. We don't all agree, by the way. We disagree. We'll disagree tonight on various things. But you know what? They're good people, and you all are great people as well. And I appreciate that you're advocating for a group that you may not even belong to, but that you just love and that you care about. I think that says a lot for you. And so you're doing a good job being a voice. And we hear you, and you raise the concerns. And again, my hope is that we live in harmony, we live in peace, and that we move to make Rapid City the best place possible. With that, I'll yield. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor for approval of item number 33. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 34, first reading, ordinance 6308, an ordinance to amend chapter 13.32 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to city cemeteries. Motion to approve by Nordstrom and a second by Drury. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 35, first reading, ordinance 6312 regarding supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2019. Motion approved by Drew. Second by Modrick. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 36, first reading, ordinance 6304. An ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by ARC International for Yashura LLC for a rezoning from medium-density residential to office commercial district for property generally described as being located at 3808 Sheridan Lake Road. Motion to approve by Drury and a second by Roberts. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 37, first reading, ordinance 6305, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions for Sheriff 5 Properties LLC for a rezoning from high-density residential district to urban commercial district for property generally described as being located at 12 East Kansas City Street. Motion to approve by Solomon, second by Modrick. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. First reading, ordinance 6306, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions for Sheriff 5 Properties LLC for rezoning from general commercial district to urban commercial district for property generally described as being located at 12 East Kansas City Street. Motion to approve by Drew, second by Nordstrom. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 39, first reading, ordinance 6307, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions for Yasmin Dream LLC for a rezoning from general commercial district to medium density residential district for property generally described as being located east of Provider Boulevard.
Stipulation.
Okay, and a second by Nordstrom, and that motion was to approve in conjunction with Plan Development 19 PD 005. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, and Nordstrom seconded. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to community development items. Number 40, a request by DC Scott Surveyors for Robert T. Sunby for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lot 12A and 12B of Unidell Acres Number 2, generally described as being located southwest of the intersection of Sheridan Lake Road and Wildwood Drive.
Move to approve.
Everyone made a motion to approve with stipulations, and a second by Drury. Okay, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item 39 is, or item 40 is approved. Brother. Item 41. A request by KTM Design Solutions for Yasmin Dream LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed Lot 1 and Lot 2 of Orchard Meadows Number 2, generally described as being located southeast of the intersection of Elkvale Road and East Highway 44. A motion by Modrick to approve with stipulations and a second by Nordstrom. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 42, a request by KTM Design Solutions for DTH LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lots 2 through 13 and drainage lot of Block 9 and lots 2 through 14 of Block 10 of Big Sky subdivision, generally described as being located west of the intersection of DeGeest Drive and Avenue A.
Move to approve.
Okay, Drew motions to approve with stipulations and a second by John Roberts. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 43, a request by Spurlick Consulting for Sodak Development Company for preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lots 9 through 19 of Block 4, lots 11 through 17 of Block 5, Lot 8 of Block 9, lots 7 through 21 of Block 10, and lots 1 through 7 of Block 11 of Homestead subdivision, generally described as being located east of the existing terminus of Homestead Street. Drury motions to approve with stipulations and a second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 44, a request by Spurlick Consulting for DOIC LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed Track A, lots 22 through 40 of Block 4, Lot 2 and Lot 3 of Block 11, and lots 1 through 14 of Block 15 of Auburn Hills subdivision, generally described as being located north of the intersection of Cobalt Drive and Coal Bank Drive. Laurenti motions that there's to approve with stipulations and Nordstrom seconds. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 45, a request by KTM Design Solutions for Yasmin Dream LLC for preliminary subdivision plan for proposed Lot 57 of Block 2, Lot E revised, Lot F revised, and Track B revised of Johnson Ranch subdivision, generally described as being located east of Provider Boulevard.
Move to approve.
We had a motion to approve with stipulations. And a second by someone? Second by Richie Nordstrom. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, now to public hearing items 46 through 48. There are no speaker requests, so we won't need a public hearing. We'll go to consent public hearing item 46.
Move to second.
Move to approve Chad Lewis and a second by Scott for item 46. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And non-consent public hearing items. Number 47, second reading, Ordinance 6287, an ordinance amending Section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KW Commercial for Samuelson Development LLC for a rezoning request from General Agricultural District to Office Commercial District for property generally located as being located northwest of the intersection of Mount Rushmore Road and Fox Road. Second. Motion to approve by Solomon and a second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 48, second reading. There's a misprint on some versions of the agenda where it says first reading, but item 48 is actually second reading. Correct?
Correct.
Yep. Second reading, Ordinance 6288, an ordinance amending Section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KW Commercial for Samuelson Development LLC for a rezoning request from General Commercial District to Office Commercial District for property generally located as, or generally described as being located northwest of the intersection of Mount Rushmore Road and Fox Road.
Second.
Motion to approve by Laurenti, second by Drew. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 49, the bill list, and we'll go to Chief Financial Officer Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no additions to the bill list, so the total is that which is attached at $5,110,391.71.
Motion to approve by Laurenti and a second by Solomon. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Scott, second by Drury. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.